And here to sing their own composition are McLynns' Old Market Street.
When the Sligo family folk group with the clever and proudly local name McLynns' Old Market Street played the National Song Contest in 1972, it was a sight to see. Not so much now, maybe it's a bit blurry and out of focus, but that's old film for you. Television in Ireland was only 10 years old, and you just didn't see people from Sligo on the telly that often. So for those of us not much more than 10 years old ourselves, this was a kind of moment. This was something, even if it wasn't yet in glorious Technicolor.
Delighted, yeah, we were happy. We had great fun, like we thought it was great fun.
It was on from Cork, it wasn't from Dublin. So we had a little weekend away, kind of, with it. But we knew we were there just as kind of the starting group, or we were the first on, I think, and you felt that you were part of something, but...
I think we knew it wouldn't do anything.
Actually, it does. I was playing it back there recently, and it's actually very good.
We were different.
We just took a chance.
We were different,
It's likely true that the orchestral sweep and poetic sensibilities of a certain Sunday were a bit too different for a song contest that still had a huge draw for the sentimental ballad. But that difference, boldly mixing jazz and folk, Yeats and Shakespeare, had already made the McLynns an original and important presence too in the music and broader cultural scene in Sligo. This 1970s story from the Sligo Champion reads, "There is a public house on the corner of Old Market Street called simply McLynns. For some years now it has been the in-spot in town for folk fans and balladeers. It is known far and wide, in Ireland, England and America, because a few nights a week, two sisters and their brother get together to sing some special songs their own special way. And usually the place is jammed tight and overflowing onto the street."
It was true there would be a queue down the street sometimes. That was true. It was crazy because, there was probably no music in a lot of pubs, Might be one or two, I'm not sure.
There were banned music.
Time.
People, you'd go into a pub and you wouldn't be allowed to sing a lot of pubs. We were the first kind of, I think, to do the sort of singing pub and that.
That was the point where I sort of entered the scene and became aware of what was happening. I heard this buzz about McLynns, and I was blown away. I was blown away by the pub, which Donald had inherited and only recently done up. Literally, that became almost a showcase for the music, because he was there regularly with the sisters, and others joined them later. And because of that, other musicians would call into McLynns. Because it was known as a music house, So the whole scene around McLynns introduced us to just a wide range of developing music and musical styles.
than 50 years later, McLynns is still a venerable music pub. You're as likely to hear the strains of Appalachia as Anna Scoll in a room that looks and sounds pretty much as it did in those days when the queue was out the door and down the street. Those were the years from, say, 1969 through the early 1970s, when there was so much happening with and around the group that they seemed to be at the centre of something. They'd come second in the final of Reach for the Stars, a sort of early version of Pop Idol. They joined illustrious acts like the Chieftains on the bill of Sligo Sound 71, one of Ireland's first outdoor music festivals. But they'd really kicked it all off with a very fine and a very original album released in 1970 called, not surprisingly, Old Market Street. Encouraged to make the record they wanted, traditional folk on one side, modern, more out-there songs on the other, the group came up with a distinctive album for their brand new record company, CBS, then one of the most prestigious labels in popular music.
I suppose we were trying to be different, and I suppose the one who wouldn't be as different would have been Donal, because he was singing in Strandhill for a long time, and they would have been doing kind of ballads, run of the mill. It was fine, there was nothing wrong with that, but we didn't really want to do that. We wanted to be different, and
the producer never questioned it. He never questioned what we picked. He just was delighted.
He was delighted with it. It was great because
he let us away with it.
He let us do it.
He went out to the Hazelwood.
One of the trio's creative slants was adapting one of W.B. Yeats's mystical Sligo set poems, the Song of Wandering Angus.
And cut and peeled a hazel wand, and hooked a berry to a thread.
It was set to music by the fourth family member, oldest sister Margaret, who, although not a member of the group, is a trained musician.
Well, my memory is that I always loved the poem, and I could recite the poem, the Song of Wandering Angus. And I thought it was the perfect poem. So one day I was home, and Barbara was here, is my memory. And I wrote the song very quickly. I was running in and out to the piano and writing it down on a piece of manuscript. And then I finished it and I gave it to her. And she gave it to Donal, is my memory, and he learned it right away. And they started, Paula made harmonies for it. She made the arrangement. And that was the song that the man who gave them the contract heard when he came to Sligo, and he thought that, there's something here.
And faded through the brightening air.
The man who came to town with the contract wasn't just any man. Astonishingly, the brother and two sisters now found themselves on the same label as many of the biggest names in folk and rock, and that's a real story.
We did Sligo Ballad Festival, and there was a man in the audience on holidays, and he happened to be a producer from CBS.
Incredible.
Yeah, we didn't believe it. We thought this only happens in movies, or whatever. And he said no, he wanted to make an album. He had done a series of records called Fill Your Head with Rock, and he gave us a couple of copies of those. They were like double albums, and he had picked all the CBS greats, and he put one song like Blood, Sweat and Tears, one by this, that and the other, and that was what he had done. So he asked us to do some songs, and he suggested Paul Simon and Bob Dylan and whoever, but we didn't do any Paul Simon or any Bob Dylan or whatever. So CBS was delighted. that we had our own little slant on things.
And feel like Bonnie, converting all your songs of.
Another of those slants on things was Barbara's version of the William Shakespeare song Sigh No More Ladies from Much Ado About Nothing.
We were kind of sidling towards doing sort of early music and a bit of classical, as well as doing folk music. So I just was roaming around the library and opened a book, took a book out on Roger Quilter, who's a producer of music like for Shakespeare. I don't know how we put it to paper or how we did it, but we got it onto from the piano on. You know, we took it put it into the harmony, and actually it was a grand little song. It was a grand piece.
They were a folk band that we felt, would go international. I mean, they were already now, if you will, acknowledged as such by the fact that we had this LP, and it was called Old Market Street. So this music and the album was a major signifier. I personally had been playing in bands and trying to put bands together. So I was very much influenced by the music of Sweeney's Men and the Johnstons, and then of course you had the Ludlows, who were, so there was those ballad groups in the late 60s that progressed from the Clancys and the Dubliners, if you will. So as the music they were presenting became a little bit more contemporary, it was almost as if they were on the same plane as the Johnstons or Sweeney's Men, and they were from Sligo, which is fabulous.
There was something about Barbara and Paula, their voices, as you can hear if you listen to the album. They really complemented each other. And I mean, Barbara was fantastic at harmony. Paula had this kind of quality to her voice, almost like, the Mamas and the Papas or something. She had that kind of West Coast American feel about her. And even if you listen to the album, the first side of it, there's kind of some of the traditional songs and old songs like The Orange Maid of Sligo. But then on the other side you have these original songs which had a real West Coast American vibe about them. And of course Paula kind of had that look about her too. So, they were adults to us and we were just kids. But there was something kind of exciting in the air, I think.
Silver stripes, she's the one with nothing to hide.
Somewhere in here, the group somehow found themselves adopting a precociously talented young American. Alan Zesserson, just 15 years old and a student at the local grammar school, had a passion for composing and a taste for the musically challenging and ornate. He'd co-written A Certain Sunday with Paula.
He was mad into music.
Very talented, could write music, no bother, top of the head stuff.
And he was kind of got modern musically.
Yeah,
yes,
modern,
he was,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then he
would
went
use strange
then.
chords, progressions, and Donald would be learning it on the guitar, and he'd be, this is weird, but he'd be doing it, he would learn it, because that's how we did everything.
And he used to come to the house just to practice the piano and that, and then all of a sudden he was in our group.
He would have been more pushing us, to be doing more, We were very laid back.
He probably would have wanted stardom more than we did, in the sense of a young man, developing and
Go-getter more, yeah. And he was very natural. He was a real natural.
A special Certain Sunday for the group was playing Sligo Sound 71 over Whitsun weekend. They joined a stellar lineup that featured, as well as the Chieftains, Tiernan Og, a young band named Horselips in one of their earliest shows, and, topping the bill, English electric folk and trad giants Fairport Convention. The festival was, as they likely said, a blast, maybe the first of its kind in the country and, finally, a taste of the colourful times that seem to be always happening somewhere else.
It was phenomenal. You know, I was 19 and I had, almost for the first time in my life, I had spending money in my pocket, you know, so it's just impossible to describe, really, just the buzz and the sense of, finally, something is happening that is geared towards us, you know, and it was incredible. It really was, and the music was fabulous.
Sligo sounds came from the fertile minds of two local music fans, Paddy Smullen and Sean Fox. That they managed to stage a mini Woodstock just 2 years after the famous Woodstock out here in the lonesome West is remarkable. A number of local acts were on the bill, and when they and the McLynns took centre stage that day to play some folk tunes, it's unlikely they would have predicted the kind of local moral panic that would ensue. All to do with what the papers called hippie-like young people. The town was ill-prepared for the number of visitors that weekend. There were thousands, and was taken aback. It lit up debate in the town council chamber and greatly exercised the pages of not just the local weekly paper, but the national press even. It's kind of funny now looking back, but I guess the 1970s arrived in Sligo with a bit of a shock. For all of that hullabaloo and hand-wringing, it really was, though, as the posters said, just a groovy Whitsun. A sun-dappled moment that suggested, for some of us anyway, that modern times were here at last.
It was a pedestrian street, we had a great gang of kids, and the boys used to play football on the street without a lot of disturbance. You know, occasionally a horse and dray would come along with the stout from Guinness Brewery, and there was a forge up at the end of the street where there was he would shoe the horses. My mum and dad were very hard-working people. My mother was a school teacher and my father was a publican and a grocer. So he was working in the pub and she was working in school, and she also managed to keep the home going, and she was also very musical.
I grew up in Market Street until I was 12, and my best friend was Sheila Gannon, who was related to the McLynns and lived next door to the pub, and because of that Sheila and I kind of had access occasionally to McLynn's house, which always seemed to me to be quite sophisticated. There were like instruments in the house and there were records. Mrs. McLynn was a lovely woman, actually, very refined lady.
And my mother played classical music. She played the piano and she played for the choir called the Sicilian Singers. That were, I don't know if you remember them, they may have been gone by the time you came along, but she was their pianist.
And who were they, these Sicilian singers?
They were the town's choral society, and we went to the Eisteddfod, for instance, with that choir. I was only a child, but she took me along, so she took Donald and I along. So, you know, things like that. We always had music.
Though Margaret's training as a physiotherapist took her away from home to Dublin, Tripoli, and for a long time Western Canada, she continued to play and perform. She was a member of the Pacific Opera Chorus in Victoria, British Columbia for 16 years.
The time of the album and the time of the Eurovision Song Contest, that was a magical time, for me anyway, because I didn't have the stress of having to perform or do anything. I could just be a hanger-on, and yet I knew who they were, you know, that kind of way, and so I enjoyed it very much, and I think my parents did too.
The group went back to London and recorded a second LP for CBS, but the music business being the music business, things changed. Executives, direction, taste, what have you. The LP was never released, but the McLynns weren't exactly heartbroken. It's hard to imagine a more c'est la vie bunch.
It was so long coming out that we forgot it. We were waiting for it for ages.
Yeah.
And someone said, oh, you have an LP. Oh yeah, it's coming out sometime, you know. But then again, we were like lords of we were sitting in the Londonderry Hotel over in the West End. So it was the best of hotels.
We were
in
picked up
everything.
in
The
a
best.
Rolls Royce or
We had a
something.
taxi fella that
Princess.
we had the Beatles taxi.
Yeah.
Because he said John Lennon kept opening the door of the taxi
He told
and
me he
jumping
had
into
no
the
manners.
street and he had no manners. And he said I had to stop the taxi in the middle of the West End, he says, to get him back into the taxi. So I said, this is great, you know, we had great crack.
And so then everyone went back to the pub. The McLynns had seen the music business up close and figured, as they kind of always had, maybe we'll keep our day jobs and just bring it all back home.
Just that we said that's it, finale. I think.
Well, I suppose the whole thing happened so easily for us at the beginning.
Easy, we had a
I
very
mean, a
easy
man calls
passage.
on the phone, says, I want to do an album with you, and we're laughing like we're saying he must be joking.
Yeah.
And he let us do our own songs.
I know, we
Couldn't
got
have gone better.
And we got a good album off it, like, I mean, we can't complain, you know.
Happy trails to you. Happy trails to you.
The group played a little while longer in the bar, but London really was the end for them as performers. It's no surprise, though, that it was the pub as a music house that then became an attraction in its own right.
McLynns had action every night of the week, in the summer anyway, certainly. And it was just full of joyous, joyous crack. And Donald was an MC par excellence, Donald could stand up, he had a vast repertoire of songs, and could slip into them, and if anybody wanted to sing a song, he could slip into an easy accompaniment reasonably quickly and encourage them. So there was some great sing-alongs there.
Here comes a man, does his working on the land.
Making a sort of base in McLynns was a recently arrived in town quartet of young musicians from the American West Coast, Tom and Kathy Moore, and Rick and Sandy Epping. They'd formed a group called Pumpkinhead and released their own thoroughly modern sounding LP of originals, covers of Neil Young and Van Morrison songs, and Irish trad tunes. It was a heady mix. The album, now something of a collector's item, spent a week at #1 in the Irish charts before being knocked off by Perry Como.
I first came to McLynns in 1973. It was actually 4 years after my first trip to Sligo. I just spent a night at Joe O'Dowd's house, and upon return, I met up with Tom and Kathy, and they were thinking of moving to Ireland, and I said, you should try Sligo because it was a really great place. So I helped them make the move in 1971, took them to the airport, and it was they who first came into McLynns. And then when I came in 1973, Tom and Kathy were well established here in McLynns, and McLynns was really the focus of folk music in Sligo. I felt I had arrived into a place that suited me. A place. It didn't take much to stay when we came in '73 because it was only for a 2-week holiday, but ended up staying 8 years. So, and that's Sligo for you, and McLynns was definitely part of it because it was part of the action there.
There was even for a while a kind of bohemian element to McLynns pub. Along with the music, there was the occasional art exhibition, and in the spirit of the times, I guess, a semi-regular poetry night. One of the organisers was Brendan Rooney.
We moved into what used to be a grocery shop. We sort of commandeered it. We were known as the Che Guevaras. Anyone I've spoken to, we can't remember when it started, we can't remember when it finished. But I suppose it's the old cliche, if you can remember, you weren't there, so we were all there. We were having too good a time. We didn't have what you could call people crashing on the door trying to get into us, no, but we were full. In those days, if you weren't in the pub at 8 o'clock, you just didn't get in. 7 nights of the week.
As the more famous song says, something happening. There was something happening in Sligo for sure. It was a signature moment. I mean, a revolutionary moment, really. You know, I mean, not to overstate it, but there had been a sort of there are these periods of evolution and revolution in the way things develop, and while things had evolved quite nicely through the 60s, this in Sligo was just bang. It was a revolution, and it heralded then the 70s folk explosion, you know, in Ireland, and it had a particular complexion here because our own traditional music was now sort of brought to the forefront, and we had our own traditional players of international repute, like Joe Dowd and Fred Finn and Peter Horn and Seamus Tansey, you know, they were all coming into McLynns as well. So the traditional side of the music was becoming more sophisticated in its presentation. I've often said that there was almost like a Laurel Canyon, you know, a vibe to the whole area, you know, and you know, McLynns was part of it.
Hasn't performed in the pub in a number of years, but he still loves music and he still loves playing, and each Friday afternoon he gets together at home with his sister Margaret to play some old Irish tunes.
I am always amazed when we're out for dinner at the people, they come up and they hug him and tell him that, oh, I had a great night in the pub. Or they say it to me, I'm sitting beside him, oh, you know, I had the best night I ever had in McLynns pub. And yeah, it seems amazing, but he touched and reached a lot of people. And yeah, he did some work.